The Chicago Bears had their head coach interview request for Mike McCarthy denied by the Dallas Cowboys at first. But now Jerry Jones cut Mike McCarthy loose, and it's shaking up this Bears head coaching search.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. On the show today, we look at how this Mike McCarthy news really shakes up this Bears head coaching search, because on the one hand, you have Mike McCarthy re-entering the mix when initially the Bears thought they weren't going to get a chance to interview Mike McCarthy, and now he's a legitimate, serious candidate, and one that feels to me like the kind of candidate the Bears typically would go for in this situation. But also, it creates another new head coach opening for the Bears to compete with, another potential landing spot for the likes of Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or any other coach not named Mike McCarthy the Bears might want to pursue. And you can make some arguments that maybe the Cowboys are the most attractive opening, or certainly one of the most attractive openings, right up there with the Chicago Bears. So we'll kind of get a sense of how this all comes together as the Bears also just keep adding more names to their head coaching interview list. But right away, the immediate impact is that the Bears can and will interview Mike McCarthy. They had put in a request while he was still head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones had indicated that he would allow Mike McCarthy to do that interview or do other interviews while still Cowboys head coach. Then Jerry Jones declined the Bears interview request, but then also declined to give Mike McCarthy a new contract. And now Mike McCarthy is a free agent head coach. It's not as though he was fired by the Dallas Cowboys. They just could not reach terms and an agreement on a new contract. And so now the Cowboys have a head coach opening, and Mike McCarthy is available to coach other teams. And so the Bears will get back in the mix there. Perhaps other teams will also be interested in being the third landing spot for Mike McCarthy's career, going from head coach of the Green Bay Packers to the Dallas Cowboys, and now looking for stop number 3. We talked a little bit about Mike McCarthy as a head coaching candidate a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, but I want to take this opportunity to go a little bit deeper on McCarthy here, because he's someone who, on paper, has won a lot of football games and has generally been a fairly successful NFL head coach, but the general demeanor, vibes, energy, aura around Mike McCarthy is pretty bad, right? Like, a lot of people don't like Mike McCarthy. He doesn't come off as particularly smart. He doesn't come off as particularly, keeping up with the times in football. And yet he's been still winning a decent number of football games. Obviously, this past season in Dallas, they only win 7 games, and it's a disappointing year. But prior to that, the last 3 years in a row in Dallas, he was 12-5, 12-5, 12-5. 3 straight 12-win seasons for the Dallas Cowboys. That's as good of a stretch as any team has had. It's certainly a better stretch than anything the Bears have had in a long time here. But along with that, you have 1 playoff win in 5 years as Dallas Cowboys head coach. 1 playoff win since 2016 with the Green Bay Packers when they made it to the NFC Championship game and lost to the Atlanta Falcons. It's sort of the same thing we talk about with Pete Carroll, with Mike Tomlin, with even Mike Vrabel, where it's like, yes, you have these experienced veteran head coaches who win 60% of their games. Mike McCarthy's at 61%, but don't go on sustained postseason success. And that's why they're available as head coaches, because if they were winning in the playoffs, they would not have been relieved of their duties through a variety of different means. All those coaches we mentioned, Vrabel was a power struggle. Pete Carroll was kind of a power struggle / retirements, and Mike McCarthy's now a free agent and not technically fired. There's always different sort of ways to smooth it over. But nonetheless, those franchises all decided that these coaches were not going to be good enough for them. And that's why they're available. They're all going to have some sort of flaws and concerns about them and not be perfect head coach candidates here. But I think one of the other things that concerns me about Mike McCarthy is how his coordinator picks have gone in recent years. Yes, Dan Quinn was great for them and is now the Washington Commanders head coach, but replacing him with Mike Zimmer was pretty disastrous this past season. Their defense dropped off enormously. And yes, there were injuries and other issues that contributed to that, but it was not otherwise super strong there. And then, they moved on from Kellen Moore and brought in Brian Schottenheimer as offensive coordinator, the former Seahawks offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. The offense flounders a little bit. Again, injury is a big factor there, but Kellen Moore goes to the Philadelphia Eagles and gets that offense clicking again. It's do we trust Mike McCarthy not only to win in the playoffs, but also to consistently pick the right coaches for this team? Because he had initially brought in Mike Nolan as his defensive coordinator in 2020 when he first came in there, and then they fired him after just one season and brought in Dan Quinn. It's been quite a cycle of coordinators under Mike McCarthy, plus issues in the postseason. But then everyone wants to, blame Jerry Jones, blame Dak Prescott or whatever. But at some point, how much of this is a consistent Mike McCarthy thing where he underachieved with a good team in Green Bay and a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and got one trip to the Super Bowl out of it and a couple of NFC championship games, but otherwise not a lot else to really show for it in the long run. Just a bunch of 10 and 12 win seasons, which is great. And it's better than anything the Bears have had. So maybe they should just be happy to have a coach who can win more games. But Mike McCarthy feels like that coach that you're always left frustrated with and always left wanting something more and better. It's like head coach purgatory there, where you're not so bad that you got to fire the coach, but you're not so good that you got to keep the coach. And hiring Mike McCarthy feels like signing up for head coach purgatory in that regard, which maybe getting to head coach purgatory and winning 9 or 10 games consistently every year is enough of a step up for the Bears that they should sign up for it. But you're capping yourself then at signing up for eventually feeling like you need a better head coach. And why sign a coach that you feel like eventually you're going to need to upgrade from when you could swing for the fences now and get the coach that you think could be better than Mike McCarthy, but might not have as high of a floor or as much of a guaranteed, pretty sure Mike McCarthy will be a decent head coach wherever he goes. But I want to aim higher and go for the great head coach who can put you over the top, as opposed to the, purgatory head coach who leaves you always wanting more, just like Dallas Cowboys fans experienced and Green Bay Packers fans already experienced. And that's the other stink here, right, with Mike McCarthy, is that he's the former Packers head coach. The head coach of the Packers said, we don't really want anymore. And then the head coach of the Cowboys said, we don't really want anymore. And he's going to be your first choice to lead the franchise with Caleb Williams. The optics there just don't work well. They don't sell the fan base and the team on optimism, hope, and this guy's going to be the guy to take us where we want to go, because he's already been kind of cast off and rejected twice without a lot to show for it from those previous stops. At least I think there were better vibes from Pete Carroll, from Mike Vrabel, even from Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, right? If any of those coaches were to have come to the Bears, it's a little easier to sell yourself on why you could be optimistic for better in Chicago than in previous stops. But Mike McCarthy feels like a little bit of we kind of know what he is and isn't at this point, and that's not very exciting. Now, whether the Bears hire Mike McCarthy or not, him being away from the Dallas Cowboys still will shake up this head coaching search, because now the Cowboys enter the mix as another team with another new head coach opening that has a lot to offer. So we'll kind of compare where the Cowboys fit into these head coach opening carousel here next on Locked On Bears. This message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. But now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. If we put aside Mike McCarthy as a Chicago Bears head coaching candidate, and we'll actually get back to that in a minute here. If we put aside that for a moment and think about, okay, say the Bears are smart enough to realize, Mike McCarthy, not so much the guy for us. We realize probably shouldn't be too excited about him. This change of heart from the Cowboys still changes a lot for the Bears, and it adds not only just one more team to hire away a head coach, but one more pretty desirable spot for a head coaching candidate to potentially go to. And I'm not necessarily here to have the ESPN first take debate on which is the best head coach opening, the Bears or the Cowboys, or some people may even argue the Jaguars or whatever. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of merit in trying to go back and forth there. I think it's not as important to me which one is number one and which one is number two or whatever, and more so like this is objectively a desirable head coaching opening, so that whether they're one or two or the Bears are one or two or whatever, like this is not just like some terrible team where like, does anybody really want to go coach the Raiders right now? I mean, yeah, somebody does, but like, I don't see the Raiders as that attractive of an opening. There's a lot of mess to clean up with the Raiders right now. The New Orleans Saints, not that attractive of an opening. A bunch of quarterback questions, salary cap questions over there. Like that team has a lot of work to do to clean up. Like if I'm a top head coach candidate, if I'm Ben Johnson, if I'm Aaron Glenn, pick your candidate, right? Like the Saints and the Raiders and are definitely going to be lower on my list there. And I think the Bears and the Cowboys and the Jaguars are going to be higher on the list there. The Jets are kind of in the middle somewhere because they got we'll talk about that too here, but like they got some questions here. But like clearly the Cowboys are going to be at or near the top of the list. There's a lot to like about what Dallas has in their opening. I mean, first of all, if you just kind of start with the quarterback conversations here, right? Like you've got the Cowboys and Dak Prescott. I mean, maybe the best proven quarterback of any of the head coach openings right now, based on what we've seen from them for sure in their careers. Like we might like Caleb Williams' long-term trajectory to be better than Dak Prescott. But today, in 2025, January of 2025, Dak Prescott played as a better quarterback this season than Caleb Williams. Like when he was healthy, Dak Prescott, we know, is a better quarterback right now. Same kind of thing with Trevor Lawrence, right? We might see Trevor Lawrence as still, a coach could say, I can make Trevor Lawrence into a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but he's not there yet. Like among all the teams with the head coach openings, Cowboys, Bears, Jets, Jaguars, Saints, Raiders, Dak Prescott is pretty objectively like the most solid quarterback option there. Again, Ben Johnson could say, I'm going to make Caleb Williams into the best quarterback, or I'm going to make Trevor Lawrence into the best quarterback. But right now, sure thing quarterback, the most sure of all the quarterback answers here is Dak Prescott. The Jets have the Aaron Rodgers question mark. The Saints have the Derek Carr question mark. The Raiders are, you're going to draft a rookie with a high draft pick, so that could be an intriguing thing for a coach to say, I get to hand pick my quarterback. I'm not going to inherit Prescott or Williams or Lawrence. I get to hand pick my rookie. It just won't be the number one overall pick rookie, but you might be able to trade up, or, it depends how you like this quarterback draft class either. But so like, that's a big part of it. But also the Cowboys objectively finished with the best record of any of the teams with head coach openings. The Bears, Jets, Jaguars, Saints, and Raiders all won either 4 or 5 games this season. The Cowboys won 7. Went 7-10 this year, obviously lost their last couple and fell out of playoff contention when they went on that 5-game losing streak in the middle of the season. But like, this is a Cowboys team that in the most measurable way possible, wins and losses, is the closest of any of these teams to being a playoff team, to being a contending team. And again, there's a subjective feeling here of like, well, the Bears might feel like they could be closer to being a great playoff team, or the Jets could feel like, oh man, you get the right coach in there, they are a playoff team next year. Yes, but they literally won fewer games than the Dallas Cowboys this year. They are measurably farther away from the playoffs in terms of what they've done in wins and losses than the Dallas Cowboys here. Plus, you add in some of the talent that's just going to be sticking around on the Cowboys. When you have CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver, you got a few different really talented offensive linemen there. Jake Ferguson at tight end. You've got obviously Dak Prescott as a quarterback there, and then on defense across DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons up front. You got Trevon Diggs on the back end there, Jordan Lewis, Deron Bland. Like, there is a lot of talent to like in Dallas that a head coach like Ben Johnson could come in and say, I can take that and take that team that's really close to being a playoff team again and instantly win 11 games next season, compete to win the NFC East, and be right back in the mix and solidify myself as a solid head coach candidate or a solid head coach in the NFL. Whereas they might look at a team like the Bears or the Jets or the Jaguars and say, yes, I think there's a lot to like there, but it's going to take some work. I got to go fix that culture in any of those locker rooms. I got to go straighten out that I got to go develop that quarterback and do some work on him. Like, it's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to fix all that. I think I can, but it's no guarantee. And not that the Cowboys, I guess, are a guarantee, but it's just an easier path towards double-digit wins in playoffs because the Cowboys are already literally closer there. The one big, old, wrinkly elephant in the room is Jerry Jones, right? That's the one thing about Dallas that could scare off potential head coaching candidates when I guess he's not technically the general manager, but the person in charge of football operations there who's making the roster decisions is 82 years old and has a pretty ginormous ego. And generally, you see the way the Dallas Cowboys do business, getting attention is the most important thing, and then winning football games and stuff is secondary to Jerry Jones. That's why he did this with Mike McCarthy. You reject the Bears interview request because it gets media attention. You let the contract expire because it gets media attention. Everyone's talking about the Dallas Cowboys. We're talking about the Dallas Cowboys on a Chicago Bears podcast. I never want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys as much as we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys today. But that's what Jerry Jones wants. It's about attention, good and bad. There's no such thing as bad publicity for the Dallas Cowboys. You've heard players and former players and stuff talk about how, they have fans tour the Cowboys practice facility and stuff. And it is kind of disruptive when they're in team meetings and people are walking by taking pictures and looking, or not taking pictures, but looking through the glass. And it's much more of a attention economy in Dallas than it is all about winning. Yes, they say they want to win. They say it's all about winning and stuff, but their actions show that they have other significant priorities besides just winning. And if I'm a head coach candidate, I should be smart enough to recognize that and say, you know what? Maybe Dallas isn't quite exactly where I want to be. They might have the better roster, the better quarterback or whatever, but I would rather go somewhere where they're going to put more of a priority on that. And maybe you can point to meddling owners in Chicago and New York and Jacksonville and also find reasons to not want to work for George McCaskey or not want to work for Woody Johnson, or apparently Woody Johnson's teenage sons have been influencing roster moves over there. Do I want to go play for them? Obviously, Shad Khan in Jacksonville and has kept the general manager Trent Baalke around that nobody likes. Each of these spots has flaws there too. And it's not just like Jerry Jones is the only red flag in management that a coaching candidate may want to consider here. And so that's where it's hard to parse out which team's spot is truly the best option. I think each coach, it's too subjective. Each coach is going to view that differently. If Ben Johnson hypothetically loves Caleb Williams, then that's going to be the number one spot for him. Or if Ben Johnson hypothetically loves Trevor Lawrence, that's going to matter more to him than Dak Prescott or than Jerry Jones or than George McCaskey. You know what I mean? Or maybe Pete Carroll is man, I really want to have more say over roster control and personnel. So the Raiders are the most valuable job to him because the GM opening is there and he can have some more say there. Right? Each coach will value different things about these openings. And that's why it's a little bit dumb to say, power rankings, here's who the best openings are. Here's the team that should be the best, most attractive to a head coach candidate, because each head coach candidate is going to value things a little bit differently. Just like how each team is going to value different things about the head coaching candidates that they're interviewing. And that's what scares me about Mike McCarthy. Because doesn't he kind of just feel like the type of coach the Bears would hire in a situation like this? We'll kind of look at how this Bears candidate list keeps expanding, and maybe the guys that feel like Bears coaching hires versus the guys that don't feel like the kind of coaches the Bears would typically hire. And we can kind of get a sense of where this search might go as things start to narrow down, hopefully at some point in the future. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I have the Gametime app on my phone, and I use it all the time. I've bought tickets on Gametime to go to Bears games, to go to NBA games, to go to concerts, theater shows, comedians as well. They've got it all, and I love being able to take in that live entertainment in person. It's one of my true pleasures in life, and Gametime has made it super, super easy. What I love about Gametime is that you can see your view from the seats you're buying before you buy the tickets, so you know exactly what you're getting with your ticket purchase. And you can also toggle all-in pricing, so they'll show the total cost up front, and you're not getting any surprise fees then when you get to the end of the checkout process. You never feel like you're getting gouged by getting your tickets on Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. Download Gametime, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code, Locked On NFL, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. What scares me about Mike McCarthy is that, like, he feels like he fits in this sort of Goldilocks zone for the type of head coaches the Bears usually hire. When we think about previous Bears head coaching searches, and we think about the sort of like confidence or lack thereof we have in the McCaskey family and the upper leadership of the Bears to pick the right guy, it hasn't felt like in the last 20 years, the Bears have never picked the consensus guy that we all want, best candidate, the guy that everybody in the fan base is right, the sort of Ben Johnson of the search. The Bears never really pick that guy. We never land on the coach and go like, yes, everyone agrees the Bears got the absolute best coaching candidate, and we're all super excited and have full faith that this guy is the guy. Maybe Matt Nagy came the closest to being that, but I still don't think he was like universally beloved as going to be the coach who's going to solve every problem with the franchise. Like that, there was a lot to like about Matt Nagy at the time. It was worth a swing. So I'm trying not to have like 20/20 hindsight on this and change how we thought about it in the past. But like, I don't remember it being like home run. Everyone thinks this is an A+ hire. I think there was some question about who exactly the Bears should hire then. But certainly Matt Eberflus was not the consensus top candidate that everyone thought the Bears should hire. John Fox was close to. A lot of people really liked John Fox when they hired him. He was a winning coach with some experience and felt like somebody that could help the franchise. I'll give them some credit for that. But that was kind of the Ernie Accorsi search kind of consultant thing that had some funkiness around it that we weren't sure if that was kind of an arranged marriage. And it wasn't like surefire great head coach. Certainly Mark Trestman was not that as well. Like every time the Bears do not end up landing for whatever reason. They either choose not to or aren't able to corral in the consensus top best head coach candidate here. That doesn't bode well for Ben Johnson, who's very clearly that in this current coaching search. But on the other side of that spectrum, the Bears also don't entirely hire the like, oh my God, how could they pick that? He's the worst candidate ever. Why would anyone ever hire that guy? Right? They never get the top first place guy, but they're never getting the like insane last place candidate here either. Like, yes, Mark Trestman was a little bit out of left field, but there was a lot to like about Mark Trestman, and there was reason to be excited about that. And like, it wasn't as though he was some unknown candidate that nobody had ever heard of. Like, yes, we don't need to sort of relitigate the whole Mark Trestman hire per se, but like he was a super successful coach in Canada. He had been an NFL offensive coordinator before, had coached players to high level. Like I think it was an obscure hire, but it wasn't like he had never been in the NFL before. Like it wasn't like there was no connection whatsoever as to why Mark Trestman might make a decent NFL head coach. Whereas like there are always some names on the list that you're like, get this guy as far away from this position as possible. Like when we look at the Bears head coaching list now, of all the people the Bears have put in a request to interview, there are 19 as it stands on Monday night. If Mike Vrabel would make it 20. I guess they already interviewed Mike Vrabel, so that would be 20, but because he's been hired by the Patriots, I'm not including Mike Vrabel on the list. On Monday, the Bears added to the list by requesting to interview Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator Adam Stenavich. Because it works so well with Luke Getsy, why not go for another Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator? Side note, I think Adam Stenavich is actually a pretty decent coach and may actually be worth talking to, but that's a separate point at this point. I wanted to make the Luke Getsy joke. You got 19 people on this Bears coaching list right now. The Bears never hire the Mike Kafka from the New York Giants, 30th ranked offense in football. The Bears never hired that guy, right? They'll interview that guy. They'll interview Drew Petzing from the Cardinals. They'll interview Ron Rivera. They'll interview David Shaw. But like, these are guys who are pretty clearly and obviously not going to be head coaches for the Bears. Those are guys that they're interviewing, but like, they're not going to get any farther. Like, those are just their names. You talk to them, but the obviously wrong choices are not the guys the Bears pick either. They don't pick the obviously number one choice. They don't pick the obviously bottom of the barrel choice. It's the guys in the middle that the Bears usually land on. Matt Eberflus was not like some consensus, gotta hire him, great defensive coordinator, make sure you hire this guy because he's so great, but also not terrible defensive coordinator. Why would you ever talk to this guy? He's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's like, okay, I guess we can kind of give him a chance and see if, the hits principle and can bring over the stuff he did with the Colts. Like, sure, there's something to like about Mike McCarthy or Matt Eberflus there. Like, sure, like that's kind of where the coaches always lie. Like, sure, Matt Nagy, good offensive coordinator with the Chiefs. I mean, we'll see how he does outside of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. But like, okay, there's some stuff to like there. Mark Trestman was great with the Raiders and Gannon and stuff early in his career and was super successful in Canada. Like, sure, there's some stuff to like there. These guys are all kind of somewhere in the middle. They're all not like super inspiring, but not hopeless hires either. And that's kind of where Mike McCarthy feels to me on this list. Like, sure, not super inspiring, but not hopeless either. Like, I think you could put guys like Joe Brady or Todd Monken on this list also, where it's like, they're clearly not the number one offensive coach that you want. That's Ben Johnson. But they're probably decent candidates. There's a lot to like there. I have a lot of red flag question marks about both of them, but they wouldn't be the worst choice in the world. I just would have some doubts, right? And that's what the Bears pick. It's the guy that you can find some stuff to like, but also are going to have some doubts about. That's kind of been their consistent track record here throughout the George McCaskey era. So like, that if we're setting those boundaries here, like, that means no Ben Johnson, no Aaron Glenn, probably no Pete Carroll there, but then also no Mike Kafka, no Drew Petzing, no Ron Rivera, no Adam Stenovich, Matt Campbell, no Arthur Smith, no David Shaw. Like, you're not going to hire any of those guys. It's the middle tier that the Bears land on. Joe Brady, Brian Flores, Cliff Kingsbury, Mike McCarthy, Todd Monken. Those are the guys here that fit that category. Maybe you could throw Anthony Weaver for the Dolphins in there, but I think he's probably a tier below on this. Like, that to me is what I find myself bracing for. If I had to predict who the Bears hire, it's probably one of those guys. I mean, because that's just what the track record says. I'm still hopeful that they'll be smart enough to hire Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Pete Carroll. Like, those are probably the top three in some order for me right now. And I do want to kind of go through, like, try and rank some of these guys in the coming days on the podcast here. But like, I think I would be most happy with one of those three guys. I feel like the red flags are the fewest. I think the optimism is the greatest there, even if all of them still have some sort of question marks there. But again, that's not usually the candidate the Bears land on. Some of those great candidates will be finalists, and then they'll pick the wrong guy out of the finalists. Like, that's how, right? It's Trestman versus Bruce Arians, right? Like, that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to be Ben Johnson and blank, and they're going to pick blank. Like, that's what history tells us. Maybe things are different this time with Kevin Warren in charge, with Ryan Poles more empowered or with more experience and more lessons to be learned in the background. But either way, we'll be here for you to hold your hand along each path of this head coaching search. When they finalize a list of second-round candidates, we'll break that down for you here on the podcast. I do want to go a little bit more in depth on a few of these candidates, especially the two Lions guys. That'll be coming up in the coming days and weeks here on Locked On Bears as well. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, you can check out the Locked On NFL podcast. It comes out twice a day to cover the NFL as a whole. And I co-host on Tuesday mornings with Tyler Rowland. We're going to talk about the Vikings-Rams playoff game on Monday Night Football. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. And then we'll also talk about which of the underdogs heading into the divisional round of the playoffs have the best chance to upset in round 2. So a lot of goodies to talk about on Locked On NFL. Then comes out a second time during the afternoon with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. So go check that out. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity for you to bear down.